All right, this is the recap for chapter 24, which goes over the digestive system. So, the first thing we did with the digestive system is we looked at the different parts of the digestive system. So, the digestive system is divided into two main parts. The first being the gastrointestinal tract, or our alimentary canal, or your digestive tract. And that's the path that food actually takes from the time that you eat it to the time that you get rid of the waste that your body doesn't use. So, your GI tract includes your oral cavity, your pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, anus. And then the other division is our accessory organs. Our accessory organs, food never goes to those accessory organs, but they aid in the process of digestion. And those accessory organs are your salivary glands, your teeth, tongue, liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. So on these next couple of slides, you have some diagrams going over the different parts of the digestive system. Make sure that you know the difference between the gastrointestinal tract, the path that food takes throughout your body, and the accessory organs, which are going to help aid in digestion. So the functions of your digestive tract are to provide nutrients, or ingestion, you take in food, mechanical digestion, which is the physical breakdown of food, mechanical propulsion, which is just movement, chemical digestion, which is breaking down the parts of our food, the macromolecules like carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins into their smaller subunits. Secretion is when our body releases enzymes or acids to help in the process of digestion. Absorption is when we're taking those nutrients or water into our bloodstream so our body can use them. And then defecation, which is getting rid of waste. Your digestive tract is also under the control of things like pH and volume and how much food you eat, but a lot of digestion is controlled through hormones. We talked that you had mesenteries, and mesenteries are just there to help hold your organs in place and the different types of mesenteries that there are. This picture is showing you what mesenteries look like. Then we move on to histology. What parts of our digestive system are made of what type of tissue? Most of the tissue in your digestive system is either going to be simple squamous or stratified squamous. So there's going to be tissue layers, there's going to be connective tissue layers, and there's going to be muscular layers. And those muscular layers are important because they help move food through the whole GI tract. So they're all going to be composed of smooth muscle, but there's two different types of contractions that smooth muscle can go through. There's peristalsis, which moves your bolus or your chewed food down your digestive tract. Peristalsis is going to use wave-like contractions to move that food down. Then there's segmentation, which is a different pattern of muscular contractions. It's more like a mixing motion. This diagram is showing you how peristalsis works. You can see the man swallowing, and then the differences between peristalsis, those wave-like contractions, and segmentation, those slow kind of mixing movements throughout the digestive system. Your digestive system has ways to increase its surface area, so the organs can be compact in that tight space, but they still have a lot of area to work with. You have circular folds in your intestine, and you also have villi in your intestines, which are just going to help with the process of absorption and expanding so food can fit through them. So starting with your oral cavity is your mouth. It provides different functions, like you're able to feel what your food tastes like. It's going to start the physical breakdown of food. The term mastication is when you're chewing, you're using your tongue and your teeth to physically break down that food. And your saliva also produces lubrication for you to swallow that bolus or your chewed up food. It's important to note that very, very little chemical digestion takes place here, if any. We quickly went over the parts and we talked about your teeth, but then we moved on to the next part, which are your salivary glands, which are helping aid in that digestion. Your salivary glands obviously produce saliva, which help in the breakdown of food. But it's important to note that you have three pairs of salivary glands. You have your parotid, your sublingual, and your submandibular. So from our oral cavity, food is going to travel into our pharynx. Your pharynx is just another way to say your throat, and it's going to allow you to swallow. The pharynx, again, is the only portion of your body that's shared by your digestive and respiratory tracts. From the pharynx, food is going to go into the esophagus, and your esophagus' main function is swallowing. It's moving that bolus down into your stomach. And we looked at the steps of swallowing. It's the buccal phase, it's in your mouth, you're chewing it up. Pharyngeal phase, you're swallowing it down the back of your throat. It enters into your esophagus, and then finally into your stomach. So your stomach's functions are to store food, it's going to start the mechanical digestion process, and it's also where the chemical digestion process is going to take place using our stomach acid and enzymes. And through that mixture, using acid and enzymes in our bolus is going to create a new substance called chyme. And we talked about the different parts of the stomach, that we talk about the middle of the stomach as a lesser curvature and the outside as the greater curvature. That there's four regions: the cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pyloric part. But an important thing to remember is that within our stomach, there are little ridges when our stomach is empty, and those ridges are called rugae. And what those ridges do is they allow for expansion. So when your stomach fills up, those ridges allow for expansion, and they're going to start to disappear. Just pictures of what an actual stomach looks like and a diagram of one. We talked about gastric juices and what produces those gastric juices and enzymes to help with digestion, and a little more on gastric juices and some misconceptions of the stomach. But what you do need to know about is how gastric activity is regulated. So there's three phases that help regulate gastric activity. The first being the cephalic stage, which you haven't even eaten yet. You just maybe you see the food, or you smell it, or you're thinking about it, or it's in your mouth and you can taste it. Your nervous system is basically telling your stomach, get ready, you're about to eat. Then the gastric phase begins when food reaches the stomach. It's going to cause the stomach to kind of push down a little bit and start to process that ingested food. And this is going to take a little longer, about 3 to 4 hours. It's going to be mixing up that food with acids and enzymes to produce chyme. And then finally, we have the intestinal phase, which is when that chyme starts to enter the small intestine. It's also, there's going to be hormones to help control how fast that chyme is going to enter the small intestine. So after the stomach, food is going to enter your small intestine, which is where chemical digestion is completed and nutrient absorption is going to take place. Our small intestine is made up of three segments: the duodenum or the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. Most of the digestion, or not digestion, but absorption is going to take place in the duodenum and jejunum. The ileum is just helping control the flow of the substances into the large intestine. And as we talked about earlier, our small intestine, in order to increase surface area and for food to be absorbed into our bloodstream, has villi. There's villi that are going to be like on the inside of our intestine. On top of those villi, there's microvilli, and a combination of villus, which is the singular form of villi, capillaries, and our lymph vessels, is called a lacteal. There's different glands throughout your intestines that are going to help with your immune system, with digestion, with secretion. And then food enters our large intestine. Your large intestine is going to temporarily store digestive waste, and it reabsorbs water. So whatever was not absorbed in the small intestine gets moved into the large intestine. And the large intestine's job is basically to dehydrate that waste and absorb any excess water into our bloodstream. So there's technically like three portions of our small intestine. The first portion is what's going to be attached to the small intestine, or cecum, in our appendix. Then we get into the colon, which is what we think about when we're thinking about our large intestine. And your colon includes those four parts: your ascending colon, transverse, descending. And the third section is your rectum, which acts in the temporary storage of feces. And it's going to include your anal canal, your rectal canal, and your anus. So within our intestines, we have a microbiome, which is the bacteria and fungi and viruses that help in the digestion of our food. And we also talked about the defecation reflex, which is the reflex that causes you to release your feces, and how the movement of the stomach is going to push down on the intestines, which is going to force whatever's left in your large intestine to be pushed into your rectum, which then gives you the sensation that you need to use the bathroom. Then we talked about your accessory organs a little bit, that we kind of covered the salivary glands already. They produce saliva. The pancreas, its job is to produce digestive enzymes, to digest carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, and nucleic acids. Your liver, its job is to secrete bile. And what bile does is it helps us break down the fats in our food. And then your gallbladder's job is to store bile. And some pictures of your pancreas, your liver, and your gallbladder. And then we kind of briefly mentioned different pathologies. So that's a quick review of your digestive system. Stay tuned for the next video over the urinary system.